two, three, four.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Power of Music Thinking. My name is Christoph Zürn, and this is the podcast for people with a musical heart and a wicked job. We're looking for stories, insights, and tools from the big world of music to inspire leaders and followers to listen, tune, play, and perform in whatever field you're operating. Today in the program, we have Nifemi Aluko, founder and CEO of kpakpakpa and author of the book Press Play, Music as a Catalyst for Change. Nifemi is a traveler between California and Nigeria, and as he calls, a YouTube-inspired bedroom producer. We talk about his journey from a chemical engineer to an advisor for companies that want to enter the African market. We'll learn about the size and the diversity of Africa, the high energy of women entrepreneurship, and the many languages, dialects, and communication between people across the continent. And we chat about the different pace in doing business and establishing relationships, and how the technique of sampling can bring new styles of music and nurtures the ability to collaborate with people from different places. Hi, Nifemi.
Hi, Christoph. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Great to have you in the program today. Really looking forward to it. And my first question, what was your first memorable concert or live show that had an impact on you?
I think it was in Austin. It was a distant relative concert. So that's Nas and Damian Marley, and yeah, it just had. I think that album had an impact on me in general because of the concept of us, all human beings being from Africa and all of us being connected, which was the concept of distant relatives. And
Ah,
then just seeing them in person, Damian Marley is Bob Marley's son. Nas is just a rap legend. So that really had an impact on me in general.
oh, great.
Yeah.
Cool. But that's not so long ago, I thought, right?
No, that it's about 10 years ago. I
Oh,
think,
all
yeah,
right.
yeah. So it was 2010, I think. Um, growing up in Nigeria, like I wasn't really exposed to a lot of concerts.
Yeah.
So it was until I moved to the US, then I started going to live shows, and more of that happened when I was in Austin because of all the live music
Yeah,
in
right.
Austin. Yeah.
But talking about Nigeria, who was this living in Nigeria as a kid?
hmm
And you're exposed to a lot of noise, I would say, a lot of different noise, a lot of music.
different sounds from environmental sounds. I grew up in Lagos,
Ah,
so Lagos is there's always something going on, whether it's the sound of traffic, sound of people selling things outside, and and yeah, we had the concerts obviously, but I just didn't go to them. So there were live concerts. There was one in particular, Lagbaja, who was well, I say like a jazz musician. I did go to that when I was young, but I was almost too young to really like feel like the impact of what was happening.
well, cool. But now you're based in Oakland, California, and can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Okay.
Who are you, and what do you do for a living?
Yeah. So background, as I said, grew up in Nigeria. I moved to the U.S. in 2003. I studied chemical engineering in Chicago, Illinois Institute of Technology. After that, I did my master's also in chemical engineering. I moved to Texas. Then I worked for uh, engineering corporation, Rockwell Automation. I did that for about 6 years in Austin, Texas. We're optimizing chemical and manufacturing plants around the US, in Canada and Europe. So I gained a lot of expertise doing that. And I always wanted to find a way to move back and, you know, apply some of these, all what I've learned over the years in Nigeria. So on my, well, I say my journey back home, finding my way back to Nigeria, I decided to go to business school to you know brush up on my management skills because I had all these technical skills. So I went to Stanford Graduate School of Business
Wow.
between 2014 2016, and once we were done with that program, I moved back to Nigeria to start my business. And over the last six, so that was 2016, so that's 5 years. So over the last 5 years, mainly just traveling between Nigeria and California, spending more of my time in Nigeria, about 60% of my time. My business called kpakpakpa Inc.
Wow.
Yeah, there you go. It's not so hard. For some people, the pronunciation is hard, so we just call it KPA. It's a business development agency that helps multinational companies that are trying to expand into the African market.
Okay.
So I've been doing that for about 5 years, traveling between the two places, between the US and Nigeria, and just helping my clients access markets in some of the priority countries that are in Africa in general. So, 54 countries in Africa,
Well, wow.
and we focus on some of these priority markets in West Africa, East Africa, North Africa, so Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, done projects in Algeria, Egypt. So it's been a very interesting, let's say, journey. And last year the pandemic happened, so things slowed down because
Yeah.
global travel had became limited. Um, Corporations started focusing on their core business. They weren't exploring. They were not exploring into the African market as much. But things are swinging back up now, which is very good. So that's general background.
Yeah, great. It sounds like a lot of diversity. So, if you're a chemical engineer, you went to business school, and you're an entrepreneur now, and I think you also did something with music, right?
Yes, yes, yes. So the music, will I say, started back in Lagos also. As a kid, I used to, well, play. I played in the choir, just playing the keyboard. Played the keyboard till I don't know what age it was, but there was a time I just stopped and started focusing on other things, um, sports. Just it wasn't just as appealing as it was when I was younger, right? But I always had music in me. So I think it was 2000 and where was that? 2009, around that time. So similar to the distant relative time in Austin,
All right.
something was happening, right? Personally, where a lot of what I was doing was very technical. So I'm doing a lot of chemical engineering work. So I'm looking at process flows, looking at tank levels, temperatures, and pressure. The company I was working for was also a software company, so I also had to learn a lot about actual back coding, right?
Oh,
Um,
wow. Cool.
so most of my time was just spent doing a lot of technical stuff, and I found that I just wanted to express myself in a different way, right? And so I just started exploring different things, and the one that came back to me was the music, right? So I
Mm.
saw a musician I really liked in Nigeria. I saw him making a beat, right, on YouTube, and he just seemed like he was having so much fun, right? So
Mm.
this producer's name is Jesse Jacks, and I just watched that video and I was like, what he was using to make the music look like the keyboard I had locked up in my apartment, right? So I just remember going back home that day and bringing out that keyboard. And since then, I've just been making music. I would label myself as a YouTube inspired bedroom producer. Basically, producing on your laptop using a MIDI keyboard, or the instrument I use is a native instrument machine. So
Hmm.
it's a beat pad where most of my music is sample based. So I would, find music, go and look for music from the past and try to rearrange it to make something different. And that has just been just a hobby for the longest time. But I'm getting to a point now, because I've been doing this for quite a while now, where I'm starting to see how it connects with other things that I'm doing.
Yeah, right, right. And you wrote a book about that.
Yes, yes, yes. I published a book, Press Play, that was last year, just before the pandemic shut everything down. It's about music and how it inspires social change. It spurred it. It spurred from obviously the music, but the story is a little bit longer than that. So in 2016, I wanted to publish a mixtape, right? Like I usually do on Soundcloud, and
Hmm.
I decided to write a short story about this mixtape, which took me down the path to write like a full on novel, right? And
Hmm.
I was I pretty much got stuck in 2019 with how to finish the book, and I had a friend that introduced me to a professor that was teaching this writing class. And when I spoke to the professor, he usually does like a consultation before you join the class, and he was apparently after talking to you for 30 minutes, it was like, man, you just talked about music the whole time. It was like, so why don't you just write about music and how it impacts social change and all that stuff? And I was like, oh, okay. I think I I asked him like, oh, so what about my novel? And he was like, maybe put that to the side for now. Just go out and talk about this thing you're very passionate about. And I just took it as a point to learn how to publish a book. So I was just like, okay, I'll use this as the opportunity to learn how to publish a book and then come back and finish my novel. So I started that in 2019, interviewed a bunch of musicians that I like, mainly Nigerian musicians, Ghanaian musicians, and went through the process and published the book in April 2020. It was a very rewarding experience, which has opened me up to other things now.
Oh, that's interesting
Yeah.
because you worked from California and you've been as an engineer all over the place. You're an entrepreneur and helping people to get into Africa,
Hmm.
and then you actually did the interviews with where your roots are,
Yeah.
Nigeria and Ghana.
Yeah.
So, what was the effect of this? Because I can understand if you're a company from let's say the Western world and they get into Africa. I don't know how African people react on
Hmm.
companies coming to Africa and telling them what to do or how they
Yeah.
should do this. So that would be one question. The other
Hmm.
question would be, what's the connection with the music, and
Hmm.
how do you bring this together?
Okay. So for, I think one of the big value that I provide for companies is being a bridge between the U.S. or Europe and Africa, right? Um, while I was writing the book, for instance, I was traveling between the two places. So interviewing people in Nigeria, in Lagos, or getting on a call with someone in Ghana to finish this book while I'll travel back to the US and publish it and all that. What I'll say is, a lot of companies that want to enter the African market, right? They look at it from a very, sometimes opportunistic perspective, right? So the companies that I deal with, which are already multinational corporations, um, before they decide to go to Africa, they have already gone through certain things. They already have an established market in the US, possibly already established in Europe, right? So I'll say about 80% of their revenue is already from these two, Europe and the US. And they have already started venturing into Asia, right? That is usually the trend I see. So once they have now have like a good footprint in Asia, the Pacific, APAC region, then they start, like I say, flirting with the idea of coming to Africa, right? And so a lot of times it starts with this exploratory process, right? And even though it's a big corporation based in the US, the Africa section is usually under the EMEA region,
Mm.
Europe, Middle East, and Africa,
Yeah.
and sometimes the person that is in charge of the business in Africa is only just a team of one or two people. So even though they're in a big corporation, these people end up being very entrepreneurial because they don't
Mhm.
really have resources provided by their corporation to get to their goals. So a lot of the work I have to do starting off is to um, balance out the expectation because everybody comes in with a prescribed notion of what should be happening, and when you do get to say you want to enter the Nigerian market or Ghana, you first have to understand the culture. You have to understand the business culture in terms of how do people communicate, what is the pace in doing business, right? I think what I've found is because some of these companies are in the US and Europe, where there are already institutions that are established a decent amount of trust, right?
Mhm.
It's easy for your business to be more transactional, right? So I've met you once, you seem
Yeah.
like a good person. I know you have a social security number. Let's get to business quickly. Be-
Like relations.
Yes. In Nigeria, for instance, that isn't that level of trust is not available, right? So um, a lot of relationship building is what happens in the first place, right? So an established company that is trying to enter the market, that could be a manufacturer that is looking for a distributor in Nigeria. They want to partner with a distributor that's credible, right?
Mhm.
And that credible distributor knows they have been in the market, they know how to reach the networks that are needed to get their goods to the customers. They've built a presence for themselves. They are also gauging who are the good manufacturers, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of times the like first 3 months is just people gauging who am I going to be working with. So a lot of
And
that.
how do you help them in this phase of getting introduced, getting into contact,
Hmm.
and also how does music play a role in this?
Yeah, yeah.
You talked about culture, so
Mhm.
people from all over the world have different cultures and might have different types of music or different
Exactly.
things that are in music. So, is there something very concrete that you say, "Oh, that's the way I approach this"?
Hmm.
And does music play a role in that?
Yeah, I think music plays a big role, at least for me, in my experience. Um, between because I end up working with people with so different backgrounds, right? Um, I'm usually like the a buffer, right, between this culture and that culture. And what has helped me is, um, I'll say with music, I or my love for music has helped me develop a certain level of empathy for different type of people, right? I'm very open because if you even look at how I make music, I try to sample things from different places so I can decide to, oh, I want to listen to music from Pakistan so that I can sample some drums, or and just listening to some of the voices or how the music is being made. All of a sudden I'm exposed to this culture, not fully, but at least exposed more than someone that hasn't listened in the first place. And um, I would say what I've experienced in terms of the empathy is enables me to be able to collaborate with uh, people from different places, right? So I think music in general, whenever I'm making music with other people, um, that sense of collaboration, right? That just comes around from, hey, we don't know what is going to come out of this, but let's just get together and jam, and something eventually happens. That gives me a lot of confidence when I'm on a project and a manufacturer says, "Hey, let's go find some distributors in Nigeria." Yeah, okay. There's a chance we might not find the right exact people off the bat, but I do have that confidence that if we collaborate and we start talking and we develop this relationship, something fruitful in a commercial perspective will come out of this. So I think music does play a good part, at least for me, in terms of the collaboration aspect.
Yeah, that's also the listening part and empathy, trying to understand what you hear, and
Exactly.
you just mentioned okay, jamming,
Hmm.
but does a business meeting for you also feels like a jam, or is this something different, or you don't think at all at it?
I think it's definitely a jam, right? So, uh, you know, so after like 5 years of doing this, the more I do it, I'm always trying to refine. So what's the real value I'm bringing to people, right? And initially I said the bridge, but it really boils down to communication, right?
Mhm.
Being able to speak to someone in the US that has been through the US schooling system, that knows only about the US, sometimes only about the state that they live in, right? And having that tunnel vision of we just need to grow the business and show X% by the end of 2 3 years, right? And them communicating that to me and me being able to understand, okay, this is what is important to you. And then on the flip side, going to a distributor in Nigeria that has completely different goals and perspectives, and trying to find a way to, break down this person's priority with the other person's priority to find a way for them to merge, right? And
Are you always in between, or do you bring them together? So this would also be interesting. Just
mhm,
what you just mentioned, people that only that have experience from one country or one
mhm,
state,
mhm.
and they think this the world is big, so we just have to make everything bigger. Uh, in what we think, and you bring this together with someone that has a totally different
Mhm.
way of thinking, and do you bring them together, and how would this work, or are you just a buffer in between?
Yeah, yeah. So usually the way a lot of my projects work, the first thing is we have to understand the market that the my clients are trying to get into, right? Let's not even try to have any conversations yet. Let's spend 2 months just understanding the market, and then before once you understand that, then you can approach the potential partners, because the partners are also gauging how much you know. Are you just the typical international company that just says, "Oh, it's a big market, get us in," or are
Yeah,
you the person that has actually done your homework and you can kind of talk to them on that level? So that is the first step to bringing them closer. Is let's first get some market research that puts us on the same level in terms of talking. And then the second aspect is actually organizing the meetings. So organizing the time where everybody meets up, and everybody has a different perspective on how to look at time, right? So I'm sure you know this, in Europe, especially Germany, Netherlands, everybody is being punctual is a big thing, right? In Nigeria, people will say, yeah, let's meet around 1 p.m., which is for someone that's coming in for the first time, that's very strange. What does around 1 p.m. mean?
yeah,
So I have to be the person that's like, well, let's get there at 1. It might not start at 1. We usually, this is normal. Give us 30 minutes. Don't get too stressed about it, because if if it was just the two of them, that
yeah.
could already cause a lot of friction. I got
Uh,
here at 1, you said 1, and then the other person is like, why are you so tight? Why are you so stressed? Right. So
Ah,
I have to be someone that's kind of bringing these two people together. And then when I do finally bring them together and we have a good conversation, um, initially, usually my job used to be done. I've done my
ah,
part. I've connected the two. I'm out of it. But then I started finding that they still always brought me back in, right?
hmm.
In terms of helping to keep the conversation going, right? So
All right.
this is why I said over time I started realizing that the value too is the communication aspect, helping to bridge the two cultural gaps, basically. And
Ah,
and I think back to the question about how important is music to this approach. I think it's just dealing with the different, almost like different instruments and bringing it together in something that could actually sound musical, right?
yeah.
But in a business perspective, I don't know if that makes sense.
But do you use music in these sessions, or is it just more your motivation and maybe you see patterns that you might recall from
Mhm.
music, or do you use it in any way, or do you even sometimes ask them what kind of music they like?
Um, Definitely. So I don't use it in from a very okay. Let's use music for this session. I think once I start, the first point of connection sometimes is me asking, "Hey, what type of music do you listen to?"
Mm,
And then building some type of connection from that. Because I found even one of the big things in my book was I'm still looking for someone that says they don't like music.
yeah.
I don't think I've met anybody that says they don't like music. So when someone says, um, maybe I don't listen to that type of music, but they do have a genre of music they listen to. And, out based on my curiosity, I might go listen to it in case if I haven't listened to it in the first place. And just to kind of get a sense of what does this person like. And so it
Yeah.
does build some kind of connection. But I think the music for me is more from a personal, entrepreneurial, building this kind of mindset that endears like curiosity to ask questions, um, building empathy with people. And also, I think the main one that I think has really been and had an impact on me, especially in my business, is the love of the process.
Mm, okay.
Um, I think over the years of making music, I've started to realize that the love of the process is what I'm more interested in than the actual outcome. So, because over time, I've developed this sense of, just start, whatever comes out of this. It has given me a lot of confidence to go into uncertain situations knowing that we'll see what comes out of this, right? And I think that has really helped me just being an entrepreneur. You deal with a lot of uncertainty, but as long as I know that I'm optimizing for growing,
Mhm.
optimizing for learning something new, and applying what I learned into new situations, I know the outcome would be good, and
All
that is mainly, I'll say, a lot of that is from me making music.
right. Okay. So, because I'm thinking sometimes I ask clients from how do you listen to your business
Mm.
and how do you listen to your employee?
Mm-hmm.
How do you listen to your client or your consumer?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I ask them what type of music you are listening to. And this helps me sometimes to uh, categorize or maybe better to understand how they think. And in your book, for example, you also make examples from how music can help to build teams,
Mm-hmm.
to make them more remote, flexible, distributed.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be interested if these the things that you describe in your book that you find them back in your work, in your daily work, when you bring people together from two different continents.
Uh-huh.
And do you have an example or memorable moment where this came up?
Um, I, I I don't have one particular one. I just think um, in general, it's just the idea of being comfortable with approaching different people from different cultures. I think that's just what it is. I, my business is at this point, our my team is still very flexible in terms of, we build teams based on the project need. So I'll have people from Nigeria, Ghana, in the US. I've had people in Bangladesh, right? And
Mhm.
it was all being able to connect with them from a very human perspective, right? Knowing that what drives this person is very on a high level. Yes, it's all us. We're all trying to maybe generate income, right? That's the high level. But there's always something deeper than that, where whether they're trying to take care of their family, whether they're trying to achieve certain goals, and whether
Yeah.
they're trying to build for themselves. And I would say over years listening to music, a lot of that is what some of the musicians I listen to talk about, right? There's certain things in the music that just connects us to what it is to be human, spreading love, um, having good vibes, and so when I do approach projects, I'm I'm always trying to come from that perspective of let me understand what drives this person, even beyond okay, yes, we want to make money, right? But if I know some more, what do you want to use that money for? Then it's easier for us to get on the same page in terms of how we can motivate one another and how to collaborate. And so those are there's no concrete example that really stands out to me, but I just think just from a day-to-day perspective and project-to-project perspective is something that I tap into in terms of how to collaborate and keep me and my team motivated.
When you bring together these different cultures, you just named Nigeria and Ghana, and let's face it, from an external point of view, Nigeria and Ghana looks the same.
Similar.
So, like from an African point of view, maybe Germany and Netherlands looks is the same.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And we all know that there's
No.
maybe the biggest difference are from close neighbors. So when you work with these teams, um, uh, do now in the pandemic, how does this work? Are these Zoom teams with 10 people and everybody's trying to, with all these different cultures, try to use this different? Or is it more a one-on-one business or one on
it's a
two, let's
yeah,
say more solo, a duo, or a trio?
yeah. It's more duo trio kind of teams, and as I said, I'm usually the buffer. So sometimes the Nigerian and the Ghanaian team would come together depending on if I have something that has to go across teams. Most times it's just me talking to the team in one country versus the other, right? And I think my style of communication in general is more of a direct one-on-one. Let's keep things small so that everything
Hmm.
is clear for now. And obviously, I'm hoping as my business grows bigger, it has to. Yeah, how do I scale that type of communication? Um, but what I've found effective is more direct communication, because a lot of things get lost in in translation. You can
Yeah,
find
right.
yourself, you have sent 10 emails and nothing has happened because there's no real directive, just people sending emails, which can be resolved in a 10-minute conversation. So I've found, or I'm finding that the teams that I'm building that are effective is just finding a communication channel that works for the team you're working with, right? And I think the biggest challenge right now is time zone.
Okay.
People being in different time zones, right? So if my client is in South Africa or Europe, and I'm here in the US, especially during the pandemic, and
Mhm.
my team is in Nigeria or somewhere else in Europe, or I have to be the one doing the job of balancing. Okay, a response has to come by tonight if we want to catch this person tomorrow morning to give us a response so that we can move this thing forward. So um, I think the main challenge is just people being in different places. Um, but for me, the challenge is also where the opportunity lies. So it's now trying to find ways to communicate effectively and bring in these teams. A lot of these things were things I was doing before the pandemic, right? And it was less, will I say, less, I don't know if I'll say acceptable, but it made me it seem less legitimate. I'll say when I'm telling a client, "Oh, I'm working from home and my team is remote," and people are like, "Oh, you don't have an office," or but now everybody is working from home. So the pandemic actually made things faster in terms of people accepting this new way of working, and it's going to be interesting to see how things pan out over the next like 5, 10 years on, work, hybrid working, people working from home and people being comfortable working remotely. And
Yeah.
the communication aspect is just going to be a tool or a skill that people have to develop. And I definitely think, you know, making music, listening to music is a good way to, refine that skill.
Yeah, it's also all about trust.
Hmm.
Also about trust. So you're at home. Are you working? I'm
Exactly.
in the office. Are you really working? So some people have the the idea that they're working much more when they're at home, and they would love to go to the back to the office to
Hmm.
just have a chat and not be very efficient every day to have
Exactly. The
two
show.
meetings from
Hmm.
one hour to the next hour.
And chat with their coworkers and just yeah, I think people are actually working way more at home these days.
So this also means that the whole listening thing, or the whole connection, has yeah, also to do with the sound quality, how
Hmm.
the quality of how you're able to listen. That's sometimes hard when you're in the same room,
Hmm.
but when you have different people in different time zones in different continents, and you try to understand. First you try to hear each other,
Hmm.
and then you also try to understand each other. So
Yes,
that's a big challenge
it is.
to really trust each other. And
Hmm.
because this could also be if the connection is not good,
Yeah, that's
but the person is talking good. What does this mean for the trust if I try to speak to you, and you might have a bad connection, or the other way around, and
exactly.
you just hear a part of it? So
Hmm.
would you have less trust because just of the technology?
Yeah, it's. I mean, that's an interesting question, and I've definitely seen this play out. I was on the call last week where we were like already five on the call and everything was going well, and then the sixth person joined, and that person was having connection issues, and I can tell you the whole vibe of the call changed for almost 15 minutes.
Yeah, right.
And all of a sudden, like this conversation we're having that was, going well. And then once this person joined, everything changed. And even you could just tell like the what we were talking about, the tone of how
Yeah.
questions were being asked was now even more direct and more um, less friendly.
Ah.
just for because someone joined and they were having issues for 2 minutes. So yeah, it's very interesting, and obviously that's where you see some of these technology companies then trying to solve for some of these things. But I think regardless, even though we're doing more remote, I think we're still um, social creatures that want the face to face. I think face to face is still very important, and that's why a lot of the work I've been doing, regardless of you have a conversation, people still want to fly from Frankfurt to Lagos to meet with their prospective partner, even if it's just for 3 days. Sometimes the meeting lasts for 30 minutes, but
Yeah.
the amount of trust that can be built within those 30 minutes by going to their office, by how they're being treated, how body language is very important for people. And I think regardless of if we're doing a lot of things virtually, there has to be a way that is augmented from a trust perspective with the face to face.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question because when, let's say, the pandemic is over, and that's a question by itself, if it
Mm-hmm.
goes over and how it would go over and how the next one would come. So, but let's say when this phase is more or less at an end, um, will we go back to what we had? So that people say, let's go back to normal. And
Mm-hmm.
where I would say, from the climate perspective or from the money perspective, from the time efficiency
Mm-hmm.
perspective, my question would be if this was normal, what
Exactly.
we would like to go back to normal. So that's an interesting question for me. But what do you think?
I,
Are the most people rather flying from, uh, let's say, California to
mm-hmm.
Africa, or
Mm-hmm.
is it also an idea to have trust to fly from Africa to Nigeria, or do you think there is a role in trying to, yeah, to make better connections with what we do?
Mm-hmm.
We might never spoke to each other if this
If,
pandemic didn't make it the new normal, that I
exactly.
sent you an email or you sent me an email. We say, hey, let's chat. We're two guys that can connect, and we
Exactly.
are possible to connect.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
I
Where does this go?
I think it's going to be a combination of the two. Um, a lot of businesses I've seen how inefficient some of these what we're doing was before, right? I can tell you for a fact in Nigeria or in Lagos, one thing I'll tell my clients is let's focus on one meeting a day, just one meeting a day
Hmm.
because of traffic, because of depending on the distance between the two
Yeah.
companies. So one meeting a day, if you have five people you want to meet, you have to stay the whole week, right? If now with knowing that we have become more comfortable with this, we can have five of those meetings in one day, at least the first one, and that can help you even weed out the people you want to talk to, so that maybe you really just want to speak to two of those five people. And then when you do travel into the country, you can spend more quality time with those two um, people that you have vetted. I think the direction, hopefully, that we go to is where we're using the two hand in hand, because there are just certain things that we can't, that we haven't really figured out to do virtually. Like, I'm glad we can have these conversations easily now, but I don't know if you've tried, but I've tried. Have you tried doing a making music with someone online?
Yeah, yeah.
As
Actually, I did.
was it? How did that go? Because
Um,
I did not have any. I haven't been successful doing that yet.
that's a pretty good question, because I think when we take hearing and listening serious,
Mm-hmm.
then it's also about preparation. So
Mm-hmm.
that's
Okay.
also for me the link to music. So no musician gets on stage and he has not rehearsed or played
Exactly.
his instrument well, and that's for me a big analogy to that. And that's more in the beginning of the pandemic, that some people tried to make a conversation like they did in a normal
In
room,
real
but
life. Uh huh.
they didn't take care of their microphone, their Wi-Fi, maybe the family, what else. So I think, hey, how professional are you? Are you
Yeah,
is
people
it
were
on?
getting naked on Zoom calls. I don't know if you remember that when things started.
I didn't have that, yeah, but that's an interesting thing.
Hmm.
And then the next step is, what shall I do to make it outstanding, so that we don't have a conversation about our technical things? So, like, a meeting start with, "Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
You're on mute."
Hmm.
And you think, "Oh, he looks like a fish in an aquarium." Oh, but you don't say this. And the question is, from, if you take it serious, then you buy the right gear. So to give you an answer,
Hmm.
uh, I bought a little, what is it, a preamplifier. It costs
Okay.
$100, and
Uh-huh.
you have a professional microphone, and you put it somewhere on the table, and then the latency, because that's
That's the
the
main thing,
problem.
the latency. Yep.
The latency is the problem, because I say something, and a little later
Delay.
it
Hmm.
arrives at you, and then you say something. And if everybody is using, um, like a preamp and a microphone, that's an investment of, I don't know,
Uh-huh.
$200, $250. Then you can, even with Zoom, you can work together. I did a workshop where the three of us
Hmm.
were, yeah, in three different countries,
Hmm.
and then we also made music.
And it
In,
worked, and it
in
was seamless enough.
it was not seamless, but that's also the hearing. You get
Yeah.
a new, you get a new limitation.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
if we might have a bad connection, I might talk not as quick, but rather slow.
I see.
So if you make music and you want to play, let's say, like quick classical music, this will not work, because the latency will be a problem. But if you play something and someone else is playing something too, it's pretty good to be done.
I
And
see.
there are new platforms like, I think, Jazz, Kazam, something like this. There are different platforms that, when you work there, then they also try to reduce the latency. So
Mm.
it's a time constraint. It's just,
Hmm.
when does your message arrive?
Yeah, exactly.
When can you send it out? So it's like real people. It's maybe a little bit like you're in a meeting with 25 people without a microphone,
Hmm.
and the people closer to you, you can understand better than the people further away.
Okay.
So
Yeah, yeah.
and it's also, the interesting thing is, oh, if this is a problem, how can we play with a problem? This would be
Exactly.
also a musical thing.
Yeah, yeah. That is the, I guess, also what I'm getting from what you're saying is the, okay, now this is a constraint, but how do we make it work with this constraint, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah. But do you find yourself that you still want to jam in person though?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Uh, but actually, I see it the other way around. So, like, for me, Zoom is
Hmm.
an instrument.
Hmm. Yes.
If I treat it as just something in between you and me, then it's hard to communicate. But I say,
Hmm.
oh, besides my instrument of speaking, or maybe if you would play real musical instruments, beside mastering them, we now have to master the technology
Technology. Yep.
that, on
I
one
agree.
part, is between us, but on the other part, that's our connector.
Hmm.
And if we see this as an instrument, wow, then we all grow with it.
Exactly.
And see, since 1 year, a lot of people are getting much more professional.
For
That
sure.
they're trained.
Yeah.
And I think, if there will be a time where now companies are calling people back to the office after the pandemic, and it's just to have more control over them. They
Hmm.
see them work. So that's also the trust part.
It's
Do you
back to
trust?
trust. Yeah. Do you
Yeah,
trust the employees?
right. And do you trust what they deliver to you, or
Hmm.
do you want to have control how they deliver this
Deliver
to
it.
you?
Yeah.
And that's, for me, an interesting, very interesting question. And
Hmm.
that's, for me, also the link with the music, because some music needs more time to prepare and to do. For example, if you have an orchestra piece,
Yeah.
someone has to do the work of making the score, and some other have to play, to rehearse very hard to
Hmm.
bring the
To
score
bring
to
it out.
life.
Yep.
And in improvisation, for example, then everybody is performing
Hmm.
already.
in live.
So the question would be, where is this different in the way how we work together? And and where does this bring us? And is it possible to play more than one kind of music?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So a different kind than we played before. And this doesn't necessarily mean that the music we played before was bad, but it's just
it's
different.
different.
And
Exactly.
the world is bigger. It's like
Mm-hmm.
the world is bigger than one U.S. state. And by the
Exactly.
way, that's something that triggers me. We talk about Africa like we would talk about a country like Belgium,
Yeah,
but
like
there
a
are big
state.
difference in size and culture and languages. I don't know how many languages are in Africa.
I actually don't know. I know in Nigeria there was a point where it's like up to like 400 or plus,
Yeah,
like in Nigeria, right? And then when I'm saying languages, is dialects and different. So for instance, my tribe is Yoruba, so I can speak Yoruba, right? But my dad's dialect, right, which is he speaks Ijesha, right? The dialect is different. Like I don't completely understand when he's talking to his friends that speak that language. I don't understand what they're saying.
all
I
right.
have to really like sit down and listen and get some words. The same thing with my mom's dialect, right? But we have like a almost like will I say a baseline Yoruba language, right? So so and that's just one, right, language with several dialects. So now look at all the different main languages across the continent, and then you're left with, yeah, I think I don't want to misquote, but over 54 countries. It could be close to 1,000 or maybe more. So the diversity is a big thing, which as you said, the mainstream or westernized media likes to look at everything as one like bucket. One,
Yeah.
oh, Africa, this is what is happening, and unfortunately, sometimes even the narrative is very focused on just the negative, right?
Hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
there's a terrorism, the poverty, what else? The crime, the corruption, and I'm not here saying that that doesn't happen. It does, but there also needs to be the balance and the narrative where no, there are a lot of, even with all these challenges, there's a very high energy of entrepreneurship. There's a high level of creativity. The
Hmm.
youth are looking for empowerment. They're trying to change things. They're more women entrepreneurs, and even uplifting more women that are actually the ones that do a lot of entrepreneurship, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes the unfortunate thing is where the narrative is so bad, right, that some of my clients say things like, "Oh, I can go to Nairobi, but my company doesn't allow me to go to Lagos. Why?
Hmm.
Because there's like some list that has been created somewhere that don't go to Nigeria." Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's and that's where again the value comes in trying to break things down. Like, okay, this is what is happening here. The terrorism that you're seeing on CNN is happening around here. The place you are coming to is here. Very is almost like being in not two different countries, but if you look at the size of the continent, it's almost like if you compare it to Europe, it's like being in two different countries, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a map out there that shows that if you can fit the U.S., China, Europe, and
Yeah.
all in Africa, you can fit it all in
And
one.
even Canada.
Yeah. All in
Right.
just to give you a sense of the size. And I think over years we've kind of diminished the size because we've created this one story, one singular story about the continent. And hopefully, those are things that we're trying to change with the music, with business, and everything. And
Yeah.
that's stuff that I'm really passionate about.
Because music from Africa, and then we can take
Hmm.
the whole continent, is so
Hmm.
diverse, and so there are so
Hmm.
many great things coming from Africa. So that this is also a message to to listen to something else than that you used to be. And maybe
Yeah.
just before connecting with Africa, that's easy to fire up Spotify or what else you're using and
Hmm.
just try to listen in
Yeah.
before you talk to the people.
That is
Wow.
actually an interesting concept, and I think it's something I could start applying right away. Actually.
So first, before every meeting, you just listen to one song
Yeah, some
for 3
Fela
minutes
Kuti,
or
some
5 minutes.
Fela Kuti before we start any, before we do any
Yeah,
introductions.
yeah, absolutely. And then maybe I have a suggestion for you from
Hmm.
Fela Kuti.
Yeah, yeah,
Don't take my kindness as weakness.
exactly.
You know
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
That's one of my favorites from Fela Kuti because that's really interesting. Kindness, weakness. How could people see kindness as weakness, or how could weakness be perceived
Yeah.
as kindness? That's interesting.
Yep. Yep.
So Africa has a lot to offer, and you are more, I would say, more than a buffer between, but more a connector
Connector.
or a facilitator. So how can people reach out to you if they now think, hey, maybe that's interesting to talk to
Hmm.
Nifemi? How can they find you?
Yeah, definitely. The main place that I'm active on is LinkedIn. So just type in my name, Nifemi Aluko. You should see me out there.
No
Um,
problem. I will put it in the
Yeah,
show
put it
notes.
in the show notes. Thank you. Also with my business, kpakpakpa, it's actually very easy to spell if you want to find us online. So it's just kpa.com. So it's kpa three times .com. And just to give some context on what that word means, it just means doing things quick, connect. So, and the reason I chose it is more of connecting people with information, connecting people together quickly or quicker than it was
Ah,
done before. You can go to the website, you can see what we've done for other companies, and then you can also just contact us through there. And then we're also on LinkedIn also with the company
yeah.
page. And I'll say those are the main ways to contact us.
Nifemi, thank you very much for sharing all your insights,
It's
and really nice talking to you.
same here.
And
Thank you very much for having me on on your show.
thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate this because listening is one of the top leadership skills, and I feel honored about this. It is my mission to find, create, and share inspirations for meaningful collaboration based on music analogies. If you want to support this, please subscribe to the podcast, give us a rating, or write a review on iTunes or Spotify. And more inspirations can be found on musicthinking.com. We have a blog, and you can download the Music Thinking Framework. And finally, I would love to hear your feedback. And if you need help with a business challenge, please reach out to me via email podcast@musicthinking.com.